Xizang or Tibet, invasion or liberation? Controversial questions, and questions that state media here probably would never ask, but I did, because I really wanted to know the answer from the mouths of local people. I have enough B-roll to make several more videos about Xizang, but to show some of the sites that I saw there as well. And I will do so in a couple more days. But today, I just wanted to get the elephant out of the room and cover the controversial issues. We'll keep the sightseeing for later. Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China, my third video about my first visit to Tibet, which from now on, I'm going to call Xizang. Sorry about my voice. A message to the Tibetan community first, in places like Washington. You're very well organized. I can make a dozen videos about my experience of Xinjiang, and I might get one or two comments from the Uyghur diaspora. And in fact, 99% of the comments coming from Uyghur-named accounts are quite positive, thanking me for telling the truth. There are almost no negative comments on my Twitter, X, or YouTube accounts when I talk about Xinjiang. But mention Xizang, it's a very different story. Tibetan named accounts hit me by the dozen. First of all, thank you for watching, if indeed you did. If you watched and have a comment that isn't name-calling, please make it. Ask your questions, challenge my opinions, but do so politely. I'm not a liar. I have an experience that I'm sharing, and if you don't like it, it's not because it isn't true. It's because it disagrees with your experience. So if you decide to challenge me, support that challenge by telling me and other readers of your experience, and do so with facts to support your challenge and with courtesy. If your parents or your grandparents left the region in the 1950s, then I'm sorry. While your opinions are valid, they're no longer relevant. You need to have some on-the-ground experience to hold an opinion on how people live and what they think there. Please do not cite anonymous relatives in the region. The contradiction of Xizang being an oppressed state and your relatives being under surveillance but still able to meet you on Facebook, Telegram, or WhatsApp just doesn't stack up. For the record, my VPN worked perfectly there in all the places I visited, and I even conducted a live stream with Robbie Barwick from my Lhasa hotel room, which is also posted on this channel. Let's start with the name. Historically, the name Tibet in local language is Bud. So if China has changed it, we should not consider this as some kind of cultural appropriation, because the name most of the world uses, Tibet, is not local anyway. It's been adopted by those of us outside China as a name to use in our own language. Like the name China is not used inside China, it's Zhongguo. And Beijing has fairly recently been changed from the anglicized Peking to reflect its true name as used in the country. It's about time the name used in the country is the same as the name used outside the country. The name Tibet is derived from the Mongolian Tibet, the Chinese Tufan, Thai Tibet, and the Arabic Tubat. So let's not get too upset that it's being changed. The people of Tibet are known as the Jiang, and the Chinese word for west is Xi. So the region is now named in Chinese by China after the people who live there. I don't know how ridiculous magazines like Newsweek think they appear when they accuse China of attempting to erase Tibetan culture by changing a word that doesn't even come from the region. Now, let's come to the question of whether it was invaded or liberated. And that's a confusing one for many people. Sure, an army went in. So technically people might call that an invasion. But for the entire period of the Republican era and the Second World War, there was no legitimate military protection for the region, only warlords. Prior to the Republican era, it was part of the Qing dynasty. And this is a question that we have to ask ourselves. Since the formation of the United Nations, has any country in the world recognized Tibet, Xizang, or any other form of its name as a separate entity in the League of Nations or the UN? And the answer to that is no. It's always been recognized as part of China. And for longer than the US has been a country, that's been the case. China's alleged invasion was a necessary step to regain control over part of the country that had fallen away, and was actually welcomed. Now, I know the Washington crew will jump on my back for this, but the Dalai Lama was open to China coming in. There's virtually no ability to build an economy without China. The Indian military were breathing down his neck. The British had sliced off several parts of his region to claim as Indian territory, a situation that still exists today. And the Dalai Lama was invited to Beijing to sit on the National People's Congress, which he did. And from there, he was elected to be the deputy chair of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Let me read a telegram sent by the Dalai Lama to Mao Zedong. Quote, Chairman Mao of the Central People's Government. This year, the local government of Tibet sent 5 delegates with full authority, headed by Kalun Ngapoi, to Beijing in late April 1951 to conduct peace talks with delegates with full authority appointed by the Central People's Government. On the basis of friendship, delegates on both sides concluded the agreement on measures for the peaceful liberation of Tibet on May the 23rd, 1951. The local government of Tibet, as well as the Tibetan monks and laymen, unanimously support this agreement, and under the leadership of Chairman Mao and the Central People's Government, will actively assist the People's Liberation Army in Tibet to consolidate national defense, drive imperialist influences out of Tibet, and safeguard the unification of the territory and the sovereignty of the motherland. I hereby send this cable to inform you of this, signed the Dalai Lama of the local government of Tibet on October the 24th, 1951 of the solar calendar. So, I'm sorry, Washington revisionists, no matter how you rewrite history, you can't remove the Dalai Lama from the NPC or its standing committee. You can't deny that he himself called the move a peaceful liberation of Tibet, and you can't deny he was an integral part of China's central governance. He said so himself. These facts are undisputed. Inside of Tibet, and there are many outside of Tibet will be surprised to learn this, there's a massive upsurge in protection of Tibetan culture. And I don't mean tourism or people dressing up. There's a huge Tibetan Buddhism university about 30 kilometers outside the city. You can go there if you're a Tibetan Buddhist. My wife, who's a Buddhist, would not be accepted. Teaching is predominantly in Tibetan, but Mandarin is also taught. Some of the students and faculty speak English too, and I know this because I spoke with them in English. I don't speak Tibetan. Tibetan art is preserved in a wonderful museum. It used to be a concrete factory. And I want to talk briefly about a short conversation I had with 2 English-speaking locals while I was there. It's very convenient for people in Washington to keep telling me that no one would speak freely, but the facts are different. People do, and they did. At the art gallery, I met 2 employees. They were assigned to me to translate information about the artworks. Both had studied in the UK, one in Brighton and one in the University of Lancaster. Both were fluent in Tibetan language, that's their native language, and quite capable of explaining to me in their native language, Mandarin or English, what the artwork was all about. So there's one myth debunked. Tibetan kids do learn to speak Tibetan. I asked the question, was Tibet invaded or liberated? Both laughed. I had some hesitancy, because a little self-censorship is normal to a hard-hitting question, but both said it's better now than it was. Historically, they said, there's no way they could have learned art. They couldn't have traveled to other parts of China for study, and they couldn't have gone to the UK for further studies. I asked about the views of their classmates in the UK, and they both had the same comments. Almost all of them were curious and asked the same questions as me. All of them, without exception, told them they love Tibet, they love the people, they don't like the government. And when these 2 kids explained that the government was actually okay and had helped them with funds and allowed them to study overseas, their friends all assumed that they were from the elites and not ordinary Tibetans. I wonder which of them, students traveling from Xizang to the UK, or the UK students who've never been to any part of China, with the more brainwashed. So the art is alive, the language is alive, the culture is alive, and the name is now Xizang. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. But please, if you're challenging me, do so with some support. Or my answer is going to be a question. When did you last visit Tibet? Thanks once again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.